Should I just do it?
Azuki, bro.
Get an Azuki before an ape? I was gonna
get what you love. Like, if you like apes, if you want to like rock an ape, get an ape.
Hey guys, JC Parets here, founder of AllStarCharts.com, and I am thrilled to be joined by Justin Paterno, who's going to be the PM of a new NFT fund. What's up, Justin?
Hey, JC, how's it going?
Listen, when it comes to NFTs, I've certainly come a long way, and I've learned a lot. And one of the things I've learned is just how little I know about the NFT world, which is great. And I get to call you, and you kind of help point me in the right direction. So I appreciate that. So I thought that it would make sense to share with my audience some of the conversations we've had, particularly like on the price data and some of the other benefits of JPEGs that is not just like a right-click save sort of scenario. What are your thoughts on all this stuff? Like, you know, someone who's wondering what the hell are all these NFTs? Like, where do you even start?
Yeah, I mean, immediately when I first came across NFTs, it clicked with me pretty quickly. You know, with my background at StockTwits and, you know, before that in finance and trading, you know, it almost culminates the idea of, you know, tradable, you know, assets with network-based communities. So, you know, whether it be a Bored Apes or CryptoPunks, you know, these assets, these are web properties, and they're next generation web properties. So, you know, just like the web is a, you know, big network of, you know, different nodes and connections, you know, NFTs are the same way. So, and with blockchain and crypto, you know, they're digital, so they're easily transferable and exchangeable in real time.
One of the things I'm fascinated by is the floor price of these things. People, you know, by definition, they're non-fungible tokens. But when you're talking about the major projects and you're looking at the commons, if you will, to put it in the parlance of baseball card collectors, those commons become much more fungible and they're almost like shares in the bigger project, right?
Yeah, I mean, the floors of the larger projects are very fungible for the most part. You know, I generally, when I look at a project, if I like it, I'll just buy the floor and then come back to it and look further. But, you know, in general, and especially more recently, you've seen floor values go up a lot more, you know, as opposed to the rares because of the liquidity premium, because of the fungibility. I just always joke because, you know, in crypto space, you have your fungible tokens, they all want the mimetic value of an NFT, and your NFTs all want the liquidity of a fungible ERC20. So it's funny how the drops have gotten designed and how, you know, people have coordinated around, you know, drops that have a nice fungible floor, but interesting rarity as well.
And when we talk about these different projects, I find it interesting how we talk about the CryptoPunks and the Bored Apes, and then you've got the Mutant Apes, and then you talk about the Azukis to get the more Asian exposure. You know, it reminds me a lot of the stuff we do in the stock market. When you're looking at the Bored Apes, the OGs, you know, maybe that's something like a gold, while the Mutant Apes are like a silver, and it turns into like a higher beta play, right? You want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think NFTs are like equities, probably more like commodities, but yeah, I think you can think about it thematically like that. Like I do, especially with like something like an Azuki's, you know, over early this year around January, you started to see these Asian NFTs come on the market. You had Azuki's, you had Capsule House. And, you know, when you think about NFTs as cultural assets, Asia has really strong culture and really rabid culture. And it's actually pretty interesting because, you know, in Web 2, we just we sit in our silos. Like we're not exposed as much to Asian culture, but everyone kind of mixes and mingles in OpenSea and everyone will trade anything. So it's interesting because it's almost like a cultural diffusion and diaspora that's going on. And the interesting thing that I just came across in the news the other day was South Korea is investing like $200 million into the metaverse. So it's almost like a homestead act of the metaverse. You know, they want to seed their culture in the larger global metaverse.
One thing that I've definitely noticed is because of the amount of transparency that you get in all of these Web3 protocols, NFTs and otherwise, and all of the staking stuff, is all of the transparency that I wish we had in other asset classes, right? Like, you know, in the bond market, like you got to hope that they're not lying to you, and you got to hope that the auditor doesn't suck. And then you and I both know that both of those things happen quite often. And in this case, there's no question, you know, to the penny in real time, how much is in a stability pool. I mean, you know, all of that. You can see all the transparency. Number one. Number two, when you're talking about like Bitcoin, you can follow what these wallets are doing. So you can see what investors with more than 1,000 Bitcoin in their wallets are doing with their Bitcoins versus investors that have less than 1 Bitcoin, right? We call them shrimps versus whales. Reminds me a lot of commercial hedgers and specs. Reminds me a lot of like the old odd lot data that you would get like in the 1970s and 80s. Like it's really interesting. And then the third point is, you know, on the NFT side, you can follow successful wallets. So you can essentially be looking over the shoulder of the equivalent of Stephen Cohen, but in the NFT space, and you can see that in real time. And it's not like, oh, let me see your track record. You know the track record of that wallet because of all the transparency. So all three of these things are fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, first of all, I don't know what kind of stability pools you're in, but it's liquidity pools. But I want to get in on those pools.
The different protocols call them that, but thanks for calling me.
They do call it stability pools. That's an amazing branding. So anyway, when we were at StockTwits, the one thing we wanted to be able to do was really mold together the transactional data and the social data, and really start to. It would have been really cool to have an open, you know, protocol like Twitter API or StockTwits API, and have an open, you know, trading API, and you know, have the two interwoven. We thought that would really unlock a lot of interesting insight for investors. So you do have that in crypto and NFTs. I think it's almost like a game of sorts, though. And I would caution people to follow trade a little too, you know, by the book, because, you know, the best traders know they're being watched. It's almost like that Heisenberg, you know, uncertainty principle. Many will, you know, operate out multiple wallets, and, you know, there's all sorts of psyops that happens on Twitter. So, you know, just blind follow trading, especially with NFTs. I think the biggest thing with NFTs, if you're I don't want to say even investing in it individually. Like, I think if you're collecting NFTs, the most important thing is you want to own it. You know, I always say you want to start from a position of winning, right? So you buy an NFT with some budget that you would spend on entertainment, or, you know, something like where you're treating yourself, and you're happy to own it. You're enjoying it. You're either getting like just pure utility because it's art, or you're getting experiential value, or both from the community. And then if it becomes a good investment, your loss, you know, position is that someone, you know, wants to offer you a lot of money to take it out of your hands. And I think that's the best way of approaching the market, because a lot of people, you know, will come in it and try to like think about, you know, you're almost like next level of like try to overthink where the market's going to go. But, you know, if everybody's doing that, then nobody's really actually like weighing in on, you know, the cultural aspect of the NFT or whatever utility or value people see. You know, if it just becomes purely financial, then it's not cool.
No, I totally get it. I just wanted to mention I had to open up a bottle of wine for this. You know, I really enjoy it. It gives us an opportunity to take a step back. Yeah. Right. You know, we're talking about stocks and cryptos all day. It's nice to talk a little bit more like what the hell is all this. So I just want you to know I appreciate you, and salud.
Cheers.
You mentioned something regarding the culture versus it being purely financial. Where does that element of hodling sort of diminish the amount of supply out there for these tokens, right?
Yeah,
like,
I think supply is what drives the market.
The community aspect of it. You're not selling it anytime soon, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the stock market, where it's like short-run voting machine, long-term weighing machine, right? Like with NFT, supply really does drive the market. And when you see supply crunch happen in a certain project, you know, I saw it this summer in a lot of general projects where like people just want to hold it. You know, these assets will find a forever wallet, like art finds forever wallets. I think, you know, your IP primitives like Bored Apes or, you know, nouns, or, you know, it'll probably find a DAO that then, you know, builds up the brand, or, you know, builds higher order IP. Like, I think instead of going movies, you know, people might, you know, hundred millions of people might like team together in a DAO and buy like a $50 million CryptoPunk and then like have fun memeing it. Like, so I think these are going to end up in like forever wallets. And that's really what's going to drive the market, which is that, you can't own it. And, these are assets that, the more you can't have them, the more you want them. Like, what's cool is what's cool. It's cool because it's rare. It's cool because, it's popular and, there's feedback loops in that.
And when you talk about being a member of these clubs, essentially, right? It's a digital club membership. But rather than paying dues, the membership's an asset in a lot of these cases. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the benefits are of owning some of these NFTs? And you hear a lot about how the benefits outweigh any of the price appreciation you might receive from these. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some are designed to be more like club assets, like Link's DAO, for example, is more of a membership NFT, and those are a popular area. Whereas like Bored Apes really started out as like this, somewhat of a profile picture project, kind of a art project, but then they built like some yacht club in the metaverse, and then if you had an ape, you can get the bathroom key, so it's kind of funny. And then they built, in from there. And I think each project itself is just a form of coordination. It brings you together. I think, I always say they're experiential assets. Like the biggest difference, think about like going to a baseball game versus watching it on TV, right? It's a different experience, in a world where, you had an infinite stadium, it'd be just like watching it on TV, but like, you can't go sit a million, miles away, and it's just not the same experience. So like, NFTs are like having the ticket to the game. If you right click save it, it's watching it on TV, right? And I think what NFT technology has done is given that real world experience and ownership to digital places and spaces. So whether it be art, you might just have a good time like minting it, talking about it, exchanging it, displaying it, and just like you're just kind of like connecting with the art. Whereas like some people are looking for like, networking or a club or really like more tangible benefits like, hey, I can get into this party or I can do, this thing. And then on top of that, like NFTs could be like software licensing. The whole SaaS model could be done with NFT drops. Like you don't need to say, have subscription prices. You could just kind of drop NFTs with each release and, people fund each release, like kind of like Kickstarter. And you design it right. Your early adopters, they just want to see something get built. And your NFT just is the license to use the software, and you're just kind of self-funded from the start.
I hear about use cases all the time. I mean, almost every day. This is a new one that I'm hearing for the first time, what you just mentioned. But what you talked about going to a baseball game. At what point are the tickets for concerts and games going to be NFTs and collectibles, and the ability to show, sort of flex, be like, hey, look at all the Yankee games that I've been to, or I've all, whatever, the Alabama football, whatever you're into, and you see the tickets like in your wallet, you could display those, and that's sort of like a way to express, who you are. How far away do you think we are from that?
It's hard to tell. I mean, I think tickets are a great use case for NFT technology. Whether or not the market gets there is a whole other question. I think due to the structure of that market with like a Ticketmaster and a Live Nation, and it's kind of a pain in the ass if I'm some boomer who I hate my cell phone to begin with, and you're making me download MetaMask to go to this game, or if it's optional, it's just kind of a pain. Like it's just not. It's almost one of these things that has to get adopted and like, might happen, gradually then suddenly. So it's probably going to be it's one of the best use cases, probably going to be one of like the last like fully mainstream use cases, to the point where like, it's probably not going to play out the way people think it is. Right. It's going to change. All of a sudden, like Bored Apes is becoming like some event, like it's just it's the internet, like things, if you want to be like, oh, well, this is going to be the winner here because, it's very like skeuomorphic, this, Ticketmaster will win this, like something weird's going to happen and it's going to change the market. The music industry could change, and, that has downstream effects. I think that's probably more likely than, NFTs going, tickets going full NFT, next year.
No, I appreciate the perspective. Let's bring this back to price. When I'm looking at these NFT floors, and you're able to chart the floor price over time, you can see relative strength. You can see relative strength in certain projects versus others, in the same way that you could see relative strength in healthcare, relative to the market, or relative strength in energy, as a more recent example. When you're analyzing, the price of NFTs professionally, are you looking at that relative strength? Are you going to be like, are you seeing like deterioration in CryptoPunks, for example, relative to Bored Apes? A lot of relative strength there on a relative basis. Like, do you analyze that at all?
Yeah, in a way. We're not looking at it in pure technicals, but we're looking at it. We see ourselves as buyers and sellers of consensus. So NFTs, we look at them as Lindy assets. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Lindy effect, but
walk me through it.
Yeah, so it was originally coined about a deli in New York, and then was popularized by Mandelbrot, and then really popularized by Taleb, I think, in Black Swan. But it's the idea that certain things, like ideas, things that are non-perishable and a little more intangible, the longer that they survive, the longer they're expected to survive. So, unlike me and, some Zoomer, I would be, I've survived longer, but I'm, expected to go sooner, right? For ideas, for things like religions, literature, Bitcoin, the longer they stick around, the longer you can expect them to stick around. So NFTs very much, we believe that they follow the Lindy effect. So we want to find the Lindy assets, or, NFTs that are already starting to become Lindy. And, what prices these things, because what prices all crypto is social consensus. So we want to buy consensus when it's down and sell it when it overshoots, because that's what the market does, right? And how do we look at a consensus is, a common thing in the market. People say, are you in it for the art or are you in it for the money? And, I think what you see in the market is we want to find people who are like more like those forever wallets, people who are buying the NFT, with a cultural view, because that's strong consensus. People who are buying it on second order are saying like, well, this is going to go up, I think so. Like, that's weak consensus. So, we want to look through the transactions, try to separate them, and map wallets, basically score the blockchain like Google would score the web, right? Or like, Twitter or StockTwits would score, engagement and like a feed. And, we want to think as a filter, and we want to say, okay, like this is, this NFT has like a lot of good links and the price has actually been dropping, this is probably going to unlock, because the longer it stays around, the longer you're going to have these price unlocks. It's, it becomes more rare just by its own survival.
I'm fascinated by the whole thing. Can you talk about the different types of projects, right? So you've got your generative projects, and then you've got what do you call it, like IP first, right?
Yeah. So the fund we have right now, we have 4 categories. I would say in 2 years we might have many more. So you have what we call PFPs, or IP primitives. So that would be your CryptoPunks, your apes, your Zookies. So these are your, some of the bigger projects, the projects that you see all over Twitter. And a lot of those we see as early, like lower level primitives. So like basically cultural Bitcoins that, just like Mickey Mouse started out as like a sketch of a mouse, we see these starting out as like, almost like, let's build a collectible first. And if that gains traction, like every good IP franchise can build a collectible on top of it. That's the end state. So, we see these as like, strong forms of consensus that then either the community comes together or individual owners will build their own, brand on top of. So basically you could take that floor, that like really, more fungible one, and you make it more non-fungible, because then you start to, build a brand for your asset. And we think the world's going to come to like, I don't know if like it's going to replace Disney, but maybe Disney's just good at producing movies and distributing them, right? Like they are not going to own the IP. They're going to own, that last mile of IP, right? And we see that as basically where the market's going to go. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to go slowly, but these brands that are getting built today, these are the memes that are going to survive, right? Like, Mickey Mouse is still around, but that was one of the first cartoon animals, and we laugh at all these stupid cartoon animal JPEGs, but between, Disney and Warner Brothers, like, the entire entertainment industry was built upon like, cartoon animals.
Yeah.
So yeah, which is like Looney Tunes and, Disney. So it's kind of funny to see it play out again.
So that's the IP.
Okay, so that's IP primitives. So then we have generative art, which is actually, somewhat of a emergent and popular type of art that's really kind of thrived on the blockchain. So generative art goes back to the 60s, where basically you had like coders would code up algorithms that would produce artistic outputs. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to paint this picture, I'm going to design this algorithm that will introduce some variation. So it'll create maybe 1,000 pictures that all have the same themes, but all are very different. So it's called one of one of X. What's interesting about it is, everyone has a unique piece of art. So they're truly unique, and you could add different like rarities to them. So, you could have something that's a little more rare, and the best artists will make it so that the rarity scales with aesthetic. So the ones that are actually most appealing are also the ones that are most rare. And because of the blockchain and the ability to mint these randomly, it's just been a really, it's just taken off. And Art Blocks is the biggest place, but there's been a lot of, other Bauhauses and different, independent artists have done their own drops. Like Autoglyphs is from the same maker of CryptoPunks, Larva Labs. So that was one of the first ones. And it's just really cool. You mint a random piece of art, you feel a connection to it. And then a community will talk about these traits and, exchange them and swap them, because everyone kind of got a random output. So you might not want what you have. You might want, what someone else is listing. So that kind of creates a market, it creates exchange, and it's fun. It's entertaining. You have this connection with art. Like I look at that and I see that as potentially the future of art, where instead of I go to like, I go online and I get the same picture that a million other people have, I can mint my own rare piece of art, but it's recognizable potentially. I own it. I could throw it up in a digital frame. So that's a big category. And then you have your one of one crypto art, photography. So that's your traditional, like your X copy. So that's someone, on, some sort of digital platform creating, one of one art like they would, a painting. And, digital photography is another part of that spectrum. And then you have what we call MGO. So it's metaverse, gaming, and other. So, metaverse assets like gaming assets and other is really just kind of a catch-all for new things, interesting things that just doesn't have a category. So like we see that category starting to expand out to new categories as they come on. So it's almost like our scattering category.
So like I have like an Atari orange t-shirt from, I think, Decentraland. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or like a CryptoVox's pop parcel. It could be just like a really built up game character and like Axes. It could be, a membership DAO, like a Links DAO, music NFTs, like anything that's kind of cutting edge. It's not like a deep enough of category to say, okay, we want to allocate like, this is a major category by which we're going to allocate across. It's kind of more of an emerging market. It could be emerging blockchains too. It could be Solana. It could be Avalanche, Polkadot. It's just really a catch-all for like, what's new and upcoming. And we see that actually, starting to turn into more categories over time.
Where's the balance between, because people are like, why do I need the picture of this thing? Where's the balance between the art and the smart contract? Because based on the smart contract, you don't even need a piece of art, right? So
it depends on who you talk to. I think I'm a big believer that the token is what matters. I think these are contextual assets. So so your token refers to an image, and people will be like, well, it's stored over it's stored on an AWS server, and that's not the highest quality format. You should have something like Arweave or or on-chain SVG. But to be honest, like if something's really cool and something's really valuable, everyone's already saying they're right-click saving it for you, right? The world's going to back it up for you. Like we're not going to lose some of these iconic images. So then it comes down to the token, right? The token, like all tokens in crypto, it's a coordinating device. People, it's an organizing device. So the token is what brings people together. You could have something like Bored Apes. They don't have to drop mutants to you. They could, swap out the JPEG. Like if it's going to be fashion, they could have a new line of apes that comes out and give you, the ability to upgrade your token, right? So I think the token itself is really, really what's important. The NFT itself is almost like it's a selling point. It's the thing that people focus on and coordinate around. For markets like art, it becomes much more important for, it's still important for things like apes, those become iconic brands, but, it starts to just become, bigger than that and bigger than all of that.
What do you recommend for like a frame? Like if you, like there's zero chance my wife's going to let me put a Bored Ape in the living room, but let's say hypothetically she did, what would I use?
So I just got a bunch of token frames. So hardware is something that I want to fund independent hardware startups, because I worry a little bit, when I think about my NFT assets, like where do I see risk points or places where control points, basically, where, my ownership could get threatened, right? Like OpenSea right now is a little too centralized for, a decentralized world, right? They can turn off a collection. Like I was just trying to display something today and they're just not supporting it yet. I had my non-fungible Olive Gardens that they removed because of a DMCA request. So, I see hardware as a really interesting point of control. So I want to fund like NFT native companies. So Token Frame is one of them. Because I don't want to see like.
How do I get in on that deal? Why are you holding out?
Well, I'm not funding the company. I'm just buying as an early customer. I bought the first release. So I was like, it might be a little buggy, but I want to support them versus like, and there's nothing wrong. A lot of people love the Samsung frame, but I wouldn't trust Samsung to protect the decentralization of my assets. So I worry a little bit about hardware software lock-in.
It's a good point. Because it's not just a display.
Too, right?
It's like a safe also, not just a display.
No, you cast to it. So it's a digital display. There's a web app and there's going to be a mobile app. So you connect your wallet and I say, okay, like cast this to that frame, and it'll store it in memory on the frame. And, if I want to change it, I just go into the web app and change it. I could mat it. I could change the brightness. They have audio. So I have an audio NFT. I could play the music if I wanted to. They have schedulers coming up. So it's really cool. Like I would say, when you think about like the stuff you want to put in digital frames, think about stuff you can't print out, because that's just really crazy. Like I've had a couple people come by since I hung them up, and I haven't seen this reaction to tech since I feel like the iPhone, right? People would come in and they're immediately like, holy shit, that's cool. So I think that's really the upside of digital art, is as digital display becomes more ubiquitous, whether that be in your house or whether that be like a big installment in the middle of the city, or like, people projecting NFTs in bars like a jukebox. Like I think all of a sudden you're going to start to see digital display like kind of interact with real, and this metaverse kind of spilling over. People are going to be like, oh yeah, like I would definitely buy a JPEG. Like, why wouldn't you? What's the difference between that? And it's really nice. Like if I wanted to go put a new, piece of art on my wall, I can go buy it on OpenSea. I can cast it in 2 minutes. Don't have to go to a framer. Don't have to do anything. So it's really, really interesting, because I think, that plays along really well with the liquidity of the market, right? If I move, or say I want to get a new couch, it's like, all right, don't need this piece of art anymore. Let me sell this and get this one, right? And I think it's going to change the way people think about art and the approachability of the entire market. It's going to make it a lot bigger.
I wanted to finish up with risk. I can't help. What are we? Risk managers. We're looking for trades. We're looking for opportunities. Where's the risk management in all this? I personally have allocated some assets. I'm an investor in your fund, so obviously I believe in it, and I'm in. I'm locked up in a couple of cases, but let's just say everything was liquid for me. What sort of signs would you be looking for to manage risk? Let's just say I own an ape, or I own an Azuki. What are some of the risk management tactics that maybe somebody can incorporate?
So for an individual, I would say you cover your risk management at the onset. Don't spend more than you're willing to just spend on an entertainment asset. There's a lot of opportunities that come in the market. There's always going to be more JPEGs, and you're always going to have, so you might as well be doing what you enjoy. So as long as you're doing that and you're spending money that you can spend, your risk management's covered. As far as I'm concerned, you cover it from the outset. From an institutional standpoint, we see a big difference between owning an NFT and investing in NFTs as an asset class, right? Like similar to real estate. You can make a lot of money on your house, but you buy a house for other reasons versus investing in a real estate fund. So we look at diversification. We look at things like concentration in position size and growing concentration over time, changing fundamentals. So we record every transaction. Everything has an investment memo. We set our ideas, we evaluate them, regularly. And we're looking for longer time frames, right? Like we're looking 5 years out. So, we can deal with a drawdown or an illiquid market, but, we have to also be somewhat proactive towards liquidity. If we know, we're going to need to get liquid in, say, 2 years, we have to start thinking about, selling when the ducks are tripped by quacking, or, collateralizing, we think lending is going to be a big thing, in the space. So, it might be, having some pool of working capital against our NFTs. But, we're thinking in terms of liquidity risk, general, thesis risk, as well as just, how are we going to construct a portfolio? And then obviously it's crypto. So you have your operational risk. So custody, procedures, making sure that, your assets are safe is a really big thing, for all of NFTs, whether institutional or retail.
And can you just touch real quick on the lending aspect of it? So I own a Bored Ape. I don't own a Bored Ape currently, but let's say hypothetically I owned a Bored Ape. It's worth like $350,000 or something like that, $360,000. It's 111 ETH for you math majors, with ETH currently at 3,300. So how if you own it, you could borrow against that through some of these protocols, right? How much do you think you'd be able to borrow against that $350,000?
So right now, a Bored Ape, you're going to get probably 90-day loan, maybe 50, 60 loan to value at 30, 40% APY. So not great rates. I mean, crypto has high rates in general, but we see that spread narrowing. So, when we're deploying for our fund, we're going to be, liquid, right? We're going to have ETH, we're going to have USDC. So we'll lend against targets, on our way in, right? And I think you're going to see a lot of that in the institutional space. So what that's going to do is compress the spreads, is make it more attractive. And so what is that? But basically it is really the bid-ask spread, right? So as your loan to value comes up and your rate goes down, the market becomes fairly liquid. And then, when you think about it on the other side, we might be able to borrow against our portfolio like you borrow against top real estate. So we might have low cost, almost like permanent capital in a sense, based on our NFT portfolio. And we can, potentially down the line, though it's not currently in the plans, is, you can go invest in other things potentially. So I think the lending side, people are people are not even there yet on JPEGs. They don't understand how you could borrow against a JPEG like you would do for your house, but it makes sense. Think about Ethereum. It's going to go deflationary soon, right? So a lot of people are like, well, how are you going to outperform ETH in a deflationary period of time? But, people are going to look for other forms of collateral, right? ETH is going to become, high grade, in-demand collateral in the system. So what else are you going to use for collateral? I think a DeFi token is generally a little too utility focused. If it can be useful, it can be, made redundant as well. So your best collateral is going to be cultural assets. This is a digital world. So what are your best assets? It's these strong forms of consensus. So we're looking for NFTs that are going to be as good as ETH because we think they're going to get a lot more liquid. And just like the world's searching for good collateral and good dollar collateral, we think in the crypto space, they're going to be looking for, good, strong forms of social consensus when ETH starts to become hard to find. So you're going to be like, well, I'm not going to get supply crunched on ETH. I have a CryptoPunk, and that's a good form of collateral, right? So these layer one NFTs that have strong consensus, we think are just going to be, it's coordination, right? It's like, okay, well, that's as good as ETH, and we're okay with it. And we're going to build all these contracts around it. And that actually, has another effect on it because you have so many networks of smart contracts and money. It just becomes systemically important to the point where it's just like, the White House, or it just becomes even more of a cultural asset.
Dude, I love this. Justin, where can the folks reach you? If they have any questions on Osprey or NFTs in general, where can they find you?
Yeah, best place to reach me is Zero Beta on Twitter, ZeroBeta. So, follow me, shoot me a DM. DMs are open. And look forward to talking to you.
Listen, guys, I've known Justin Paterno. How long have we known each other, Justin? Over a decade, easy.
I met you and Josh like way back in this. It was probably 2010.
I remember when I first met you, you were like, to Josh, it's like, oh, this is Zero Beta. And then we started talking. I was like, wait a minute, you're Zero Hedge? And you're like, no. Zero Beta, not Zero Hedge. It was like the first time we met.
Yeah, you were charged for days back then.
Wow. Old school. Dude, nobody knows that. Nobody knows that. That's hilarious. Yeah, before All-Star Charts, I was charged for days. And then Perlman's like, JC, you got to be All-Star Charts. You got to just own one of them. So Charts for Days was gone forever.
Yeah, Charts for Days is good. You got to bring that back one day.
Bring it back. We'll bring it back. Yeah. 2.0. All right, Justin, listen, bro, this is awesome. I really appreciate it. Guys, follow Justin on Twitter at Zero Beta. And, he'll be talking about a lot of stuff that is way above my pay grade. But feel free to ask him any questions. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, JC.